Welcome back to World War Live. I'm your host, Conrad Franz, joined by nobody. It is, of course, just me here, 7:52 p.m. Central Time here in the United States. It's good to be back. We're not experiencing technical difficulties. Nothing is different, so I can assure you this is just Substack now is deciding to work this week, so this is 2 out of 3 weeks Substack has decided to work. So thank you, everyone, for joining. We've already got some great super chats in here, so I want to thank all the people that are, of course, going to support. Let's get that out of the way. And, of course, before I dive into the analysis, obviously people can see the title, Ukraine Article 5. We are fresh off the Trump-Zelensky European Summit in D.C. right after the Trump-Putin Alaska Summit. So that's what we are currently focusing on right now. And there have been recent murmurings from Trump about Article 5-like guarantees for NATO and all sorts of other interesting proposals that are obviously going to escalate the conflict because ceasefires seem nowhere in sight and the Russians continue to advance across the front lines. So again, leave a super chat if you want to answer or ask any questions that I will be answering, but be sure to check out the Substack worldwarnow.co. That is, of course, our home base. Someone is ringing my doorbell. It's not what we need to be happening right now. But be sure to check out the worldwarnow.co on Substack. I'm going to be sure to share the screen here and make sure everybody is subscribing here. So be sure to hit up worldwarnow.co to subscribe and get access to all of our... Which freaking window am I sharing? Here we go. Should get access to all of our Ether Hour content as well as our recent... Oh, no. Can't be doing this. Forgot we don't want to be opening Substack windows. So worldwarnow.co, you can check that out in the chat down there below. You can get behind the paywall for $7 a month, and you can hear not only our weekly free Ether World War Now episodes, of course, which are also on YouTube, but you get access to our exclusive subscriber-only second half of our Ether Hour episodes. Our recent one with Dr. Steve Su about the China-Taiwan conflict is, in my opinion, one of our best episodes. So click that link I just dropped in the chat. It's obviously in the description wherever you're listening to this. And if you haven't already listened to our China-Taiwan episode with Steve Su, you need to do that immediately. We've got some super chats here already. Paisios, first and never last, $2. Thank you, sir. Strong soldier here, Paisios. Glad to see him with the wrench holding things down in the chat. And $20 from Alan Wong. Blessed feast of the transfiguration of our Lord Jesus Christ. Billions must observe. It's true. It's the transfiguration on the old calendar. And for those that don't know, we need to keep the persecuted church in the Holy Land in our prayers because the Jews, the Zionists in occupied Palestine have unfortunately restricted the Christians, the Orthodox, from celebrating the Feast of the Transfiguration on Mount Tabor, where the yearly miracle, where the cloud of the Transfiguration appears atop the mountain, is happening. Perhaps we will discuss that a little bit later in the episode, but I might have to put something on here and tell everyone in my house to shut up. But we've got $5 more here from Jonathan Kelly. What's the gambling odds that they just give Western Ukraine to Poland? $4.99. Well, that's the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about today as all of this peace stuff develops. And I mean, Medvedev has been posting those maps for a long time. And give me 1 second. Sorry about that. But I think the possibility of Western Ukraine going to Poland at this point is quite low, in the sense that the Ukrainians are still doubling down on being willing to give up even Donetsk, Luhansk, any of these territories. They're not even willing to give up the 29% of Donetsk that they do control. So the idea that they would be willing to give up Zaporozhye and Kherson, let alone Western Ukraine to Poland, I mean, the Russians might like that. The Russians might consider that a way of fully neutralizing the rogue elements within Ukraine. But I'm not 100% sure that the Poles are interested. There's already so many Ukrainians in Poland these days. I mean, there's probably, I don't know how many millions of Ukrainians in Poland, but They are by far the largest ethnic group that is outside of more migrants, no Middle Eastern migrants, nobody like that. The Ukrainians are going to be by far the largest ethnic group that have gone into these countries. So I don't think maybe if the Poles think taking it can mean they can forcibly relocate any of the Ukrainians within Poland itself into their newly claimed Ukrainian territory, maybe that is part of the cards. But I think probably not very likely right now. But it's a good question. And again, anything is possible, especially, if the regime falls, there are elections, the Russians really start to take more territory. Who knows? We've got 499 here from Pantalemon. Glory to God, I was baptized today. Thank you for your work. Glory to God. Be sure to keep us in your prayers. Pantalemon, baptized. That is, the best news we can hear on the show. If anyone else, has ever received in the church, be sure to let us know. The baptisms are what we love to hear about. So congratulations on your reception into the Orthodox Church. Be sure to keep me in your prayers, keep the show in your prayers. And that's I hope this is the beginning of a beautiful journey, and understand that you're going to feel good right now. Be sure to use this grace that you've been given to maximize your prayers and your asceticism, and get into the good habits, because in a few months, the devil and the attacks are really going to start. So you got to be watchful and careful. But the newly illumined, the grace is there. So please keep me, humble servant Conrad, the rest of us here at World War Now, in your prayers. But congratulations to Pantalemon. That's what we love to hear. But with all of that, it's probably time to hop in again. worldwarnow.co. That is where you can find all of our stuff. Obviously, subscribe on YouTube if you're watching on here. Follow us on X at @WorldWarNow_. Be sure you can find us wherever else podcasts are found, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, all these places. So thank you again for all of the support, for everybody that has already gotten behind the paywall. But it is time to start talking about the stuff in Ukraine. And I've got an article pulled up here from Anti-War. We have right here, Trump says he's willing to support European troops in Ukraine by air as part of potential security guarantee. Russia has been clear that it won't accept an arrangement where troops from NATO countries are deployed to Ukraine. President Trump said on Tuesday that he may be willing to provide air support for European troops on the ground in Ukraine as part of potential security guarantee, an arrangement that would be unacceptable to Russia. This is sort of all those things in the milieu of, we're going to do something like Article 5. Giorgia Meloni of the Italians has said that she is eager to give Ukraine something akin to Article 5 guarantees regarding defense, which, again, if that is signed, that would mean that immediately it would be triggered, and whoever is a signatory to that would have to go to war against Russia. So it's not clear how Trump is exactly trying to thread this needle. But I think the question becomes, how is Trump, is Trump actually going to be a signatory to this, or is he just going to be facilitating a deal that the Europeans sign on to? We already see these huge deals where Europe and the Ukrainians are going to be buying hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. weapons. So it's sort of making up for, in Trump's mind, this isn't giving them a lot of aid. It's, we're actually making money on these deals, but ultimately it is still about outfitting the Ukrainian war machine. And very much, look, you can swap as much territory as you want, but one of the main Russian war goals is demilitarization. So pouring weapons into Ukraine is obviously not going to lead to a quick end to this conflict. But I'm going to keep reading here. When it comes to security, they're willing to put people on the ground, Trump told Fox News, referring to European countries. We're willing to help them with these things, especially probably if you talk about by air. Because no one has the kind of stuff we have. Really, they don't. The president also assured that U.S. troops wouldn't be deployed to Ukraine. A day earlier, he wouldn't rule out the idea of putting American boots on the ground in Ukraine. Group of European countries led by France and the UK, which calls itself the Coalition of the Willing, pushing for an arrangement that would deploy forces to Ukraine as part of a potential peace deal. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer hosted a virtual meeting of the group on Tuesday. Starmer's office said in a press release in the meeting that the British leader outlined that Coalition of the Willing planning teams would meet with their U.S. counterparts in the coming days to further strengthen plans to deliver robust security guarantees and prepare for the deployment of a reassurance force if the hostilities ended. A day earlier, Russia restated its opposition to the idea. We reiterate our repeatedly expressed position that we deny any scenarios that envisage the deployment of a military contingent to Ukraine with the participation of NATO states, which could lead to an uncontrollable escalation of the conflict with unpredictable consequences, said Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. Axios reported on Tuesday that Trump had agreed with the Europeans that they should provide Ukraine with NATO Article 5-like security guarantees without bringing Ukraine into the alliance, and that Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the talks on potential security guarantees. The Axios report also said that Russian President Vladimir Putin told Trump during the Alaska summit that he was willing to discuss the principle of security guarantees for Ukraine and mentioned China as one of the potential guarantors. Putin could have been referring to an arrangement included in a draft peace deal in April 22, under which Ukraine would be a neutral state, but would receive security guarantees from several countries, including the US, Britain, China, and Russia. Although all the details weren't worked out, Russia wanted a deal where all security guarantors would have to agree unanimously on any action, meaning any signatory would have a veto. So the idea of, as the article just said, Article 5-like security guarantees, it's so silly because Article 5 is the most, with NATO membership being a red line for Russia, the Ukrainians not wanting, NATO membership for the Russians not wanting NATO membership for the Ukrainians, that being something that is a casus belli for the war, part of the reason they went in to begin with, saying, well, we're just going to give them Article 5-like guarantees and not actually bring them into NATO. That's literally worse than just bringing them into NATO. Maybe you could have brought them into NATO and said, but Article 5 doesn't apply or any of these other things. That would probably be better than just applying the article of NATO that Russia's the most worried about, which is the fact that it gives the West and NATO a pretext to interpret a Russian action as an excuse to go to war against them. That's obviously not going to be acceptable to the Russians. And this peace deal where these multiple countries and there's sort of a Security Council-esque entity that is able to veto any potential action, the US and the West aren't going to want that because Russia is obviously going to be able, if Russia has a veto or if China has a veto, they're going to be, that completely nullifies whatever whatever ability America and the West actually have here. But it mentions here that Putin was willing to talk about security guarantees and floated that kind of absurd option, which is sort of him saying he's not actually willing to cede to security guarantees that the West is actually talking about here. But I did read somewhere else, and this isn't exactly, hold on, I'm going to start sharing a different article here, and I'll pull that up in a second. We'll read that in one sec. But Putin apparently also mentioned that he was willing to discuss Zaporozhye and Kherson, or rather, he's even willing to give a ceasefire if the Ukrainians left Donetsk and Luhansk, which isn't really a good sign, in my opinion. The idea that Putin is, actually considering not taking Zaporozhye and Kherson is really not good. And I'm not sure if that's exactly what he was signaling. He has done a pretty good job of making it clear that the Russian Constitution is the Russian Constitution. Even he, as the president, isn't necessarily capable of overriding that. So Kherson, including the cities, Zaporozhye, these all have to become Russian. And obviously, Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, Kharkov, these places that the Russians have taken some territory, they're going to try to use those as bargaining chips. But I'm not sure they have enough of that territory for the Ukrainians or the Americans to see that as, legitimate concessions. The Ukrainians, of course, still pushing pedal to the metal, are still talking about, maybe we'll give up Crimea, still as if Crimea hasn't been Russian since 2014. It's been over a decade. So everybody is sort of slow walking any potential concessions, and Trump punting in the summit that he had, basically saying that Putin and Zelensky are going to have to be the ones. They're going to be the only parties involved in talking about territory swaps. And Zelensky's still saying it's not negotiable. Well, we're at an impasse. This was all just a bunch of wasted jet fuel to fly around for a bunch of nonsense, because we're exactly where we started, where Zelensky doesn't want to give up territory and Putin is still demanding the exact same demands he did before. The only shift, I guess, here is that somehow Putin is, talking about security guarantees, but then giving the United States ridiculous ideas like we're going to have China be a part of it. The US isn't going to agree with that. So I'm not saying Putin is, bullshitting here, but it's more so that Putin realizes that he is winning on the ground. He realizes that he can gain legitimacy in the eyes of the West for taking territory if he goes along with these negotiations, but realizes that ultimately the Ukrainian and the Russian visions are still so far apart that he's still going to be able to dictate on the battlefield what goes on. And they need to keep advancing. I have heard reports that a lot of their recent big gains after those breakthroughs have been slowly beaten back by some Ukrainian counteroffensives. But the next few weeks, I think, are really going to tell the tale as far as where else Russia is going to launch, because obviously they're going to be slowly but surely moving forward in the Donetsk direction, probably seizing as much of that territory as they can before the rains really start. But the other question is, what are they going to do in Zaporozhye and Kherson? What are they going to do in, excuse me, what are they going to do in those other regions where they're trying to take territory, obviously for the purpose of bargaining. In my opinion, they should be taking that territory for the purpose of a buffer zone after what happened in the Kursk region, after what happened other places in the past 2 years. So this is obviously a very, there's also the fact that they're talking about Iran. The whole Iran-Israel situation is also, these two powers, Russia and America, are very influential in that scene. So we're going to have to deal with all of that. But let's go to this article about the future Putin and Zelensky meeting, because that is sort of the next step here. We've already seen the non-effective Putin-Trump, now seen Trump meet with the enemies of Putin, which is Zelensky and pretty much everyone in Europe. The people there it was a huge group of people: Keir Starmer, Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, Merz from Germany, whatever his name is, the leader of Finland, all sorts of characters. Meloni, obviously from Italy, all sorts of people were there. So it was quite the cast of characters. But again, nothing really changed. The only thing that seems to have changed is that Putin and Zelensky seem willing to meet. The recent report is that Putin proposed a meeting in Moscow between Zelensky and Trump, and that was apparently unacceptable to Trump and Zelensky. I don't know if they're scared or if they think that it would just be too legitimizing to Putin and the Russian regime to go there. I think Zelensky thinks that. I don't think Trump thinks that, but I think he was probably convinced of that. But regardless, let's dive into this article here. Y'all want to actually be able to read along? I guess we should. Yep. President Trump said on Monday that he was working on arranging a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, comments that came after a day of hosting the Ukrainian leader and several European officials at the White House. At the conclusion of the meetings, I called President Putin and began the arrangements for a meeting at a location to be determined between President Putin and President Zelensky. The president wrote on Truth Social. Trump said that once Putin and Zelensky meet, he would join them for a three-way talk. After the meeting takes place, we will have a trilat, which would be the two presidents plus myself, he wrote. Trilat being a trilateral summit. Yuri Ushakov, an aide to Putin, said that during the call with Trump, the Russian leader expressed support for direct negotiations between the delegations of Russia and Ukraine. Trump said that one topic of discussion with Zelensky and European leaders on Monday was the potential security guarantees Ukraine would receive from Western nations as part of a peace deal, which will likely be a major sticking point in negotiations with Russia. During the meeting, we discussed security guarantees to Ukraine, which guarantees would be provided by the various European countries with a coordination with the United States of America, he said. European leaders led by the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron are calling for a troop deployment to Ukraine to uphold any potential peace deal. When asked if the U.S. would send troops to Ukraine, Trump didn't rule out the idea. That's not what we want to hear. You got to remember here that Trump promised to end the Russia-Ukraine war before he even got inaugurated. And now here we are, August 19th, 2025, 8 months into the Trump presidency. And he's now not ruling out the idea of sending troops to Ukraine. I'm not trying to be that guy, but it's a fell for it again example par excellence here. But Russia has made it clear that it's strongly opposed to the idea of deployment of troops from NATO countries to Ukraine, a position it reiterated on Monday. We reiterate our repeatedly expressed position that we deny any scenarios that envisage the deployment of a military contingent to Ukraine with the participation of NATO states, which could lead to an uncontrollable escalation of the conflict with unpredictable consequences, said Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. The other major sticking point is the issue of territory. Russia has reportedly offered to end the war if Ukraine withdraws from the Donbass region, and the lines are frozen in the southern Kherson and Zaporozhye oblasts. But Zelensky continues to publicly reject the idea of ceding territory. Zelensky has received strong backing from the European leaders who joined him in Washington and held talks with him to coordinate their position ahead of the meetings with Trump. According to a press release from Zelensky's office, he and the Europeans stressed firm support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and the unacceptability of changing internationally recognized state borders by force. This is the biggest concession from Putin since the start of the war. The offer to end the war and freeze the lines in southern Kherson and Zaporozhye. I don't know if that means a ceasefire, or I don't know if that means actually that's going to be the line. If so, that is a horrible concession. I mean, I would hope that means we stop it now and then we get Zaporozhye and Kherson cities in negotiations to prevent these, historic cities from getting destroyed by mortar fire any more than they already have. But I don't know, maybe Putin's so scared, maybe they realize that the people there have no interest in being part of Russia. I mean, look, I think it was 10 Russian soldiers were injured or killed by a Ukrainian partisan operation in Melitopol, which is the current functional capital of Russian-occupied Zaporozhye. It's the second largest city in Zaporozhye. I don't know what it is now. At one point it had 400,000 people in it. And you've got people there that consider themselves loyal to Ukraine and are willing to take action, political terroristic action, and attack Russian soldiers. So this idea that Russia's going to necessarily have easy political control over all this territory is also somewhat dubious. There's going to have to be, in my opinion, and based on how these things are going, the Russians are going to have to establish more of the situation on the ground. There's not exactly any kind of ceasefire, let alone real deal in sight. And there's going to have to be not miraculous events, but kind of earth-shattering events that are going to have to shift people's perspectives and have them accept the reality of living in these Russian territories. Because as far as I can tell, the military is going to have to do a lot more than what they're already doing. $2 more from Paisio. Zelensky wearing a suit was a big surprise. Well, it's really barely a suit. It's sort of like a black thing and like a fuzzy overcoat, and he's like kind of pudging out of it. He looks too fat to wear it. It was an interesting choice, but I guess it was acceptable enough for Trump's vibe check, insisting that he wear a suit. But anyone else who has a question, of course, they can leave the super chat, get starred, so I'll be able to see it there. Yeah, this has the list here of who was joined. It says Zelensky was joined in Washington by Starmer, Macron, Merz, Giorgia Meloni, Alexander Stubb, Ursula von der Leyen, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. So the gang was all there. And again, everybody is sort of turning away right now from the Levant, despite the fact that Lebanon is sort of on the verge of a civil war as Hezbollah is being forcibly disarmed. And Iran, officials have been saying for the past weeks that the war between Iran and Israel could break out again any day now. But Iran is facing immense pressure, their water crisis, their economic crisis. It's hurting them very deeply. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see them trying to come back to the table with the United States sometime soon. But again, this is all in the vein of Israel trying to actually provoke them to do something to Israel, or for Israel trying to just push them enough to where they respond and the U.S. is forced to go all in on Iran, which again, I'm sure at a certain point, if there's any progress made on the Ukraine front as far as territory and security guarantees, which I'm skeptical of, Russia and the U.S. and maybe even China will start negotiating about the Middle East. And I think that's going to be even more interesting. And of course, we also have the whole Zangezur corridor issue. All the World War Now stuff is really coming to the fore. I mean, we were talking about the Zangezur corridor literally in 2022. I might even have to go back and listen to the first few episodes of the show and see that we were talking about it then to sort of hit us with a prescience check. So I may have to do that, even if it'll make me cringe to listen to myself in episode 1 with my limited broadcasting abilities that have now, of course, been cultivated. And you see me now before you as the paragon of rhetoric that I am today. But let me check the rest of the front pages here, the rest of the front page of Anti-War, which I just recommend everybody, if you want to know where to read as far as news goes, antiwar.com is pretty much the best way to do it. Yeah, we have the Ukrainian attack on the Russian pipeline, halting flows of oil flow to Hungary, causing Hungary to threaten to stop sending energy into Ukraine, which that would be interesting. Here we go with the Iranian stuff. Iran warns Israel could resume its war at any time. Iranian First Vice President Mohammad Reza Aref warned on Monday that Israel could resume its war on Iran at any time and that Tehran must be prepared for the possibility. We must be prepared at every moment for a confrontation. Right now, we are not even in a ceasefire agreement. We are in a cessation of hostilities, Aref said. The Iranian official said that Tehran prefers diplomacy but is unsure what the other side will do, and if the war does start, Iran will be prepared to end it. All right. I know it's been a while. I have not checked Substack chat here in a second. Got a solid amount of people in there. So hello to everybody listening on Substack. It's glad that it is working. Again, hopefully in the future, Substack chat can actually show up in StreamYard and my streaming software. Potentially, maybe even Substack could implement its own form of super chat or something like that, where people could send in money to have questions answered and not be like on YouTube where they take 30%. Maybe Substack could be more generous and only take 10%. So all sorts of great things could come for the future. But the Iranian official said that Tehran prefers diplomacy but is unsure what the other side will do, and that if the war does restart, Iran will be prepared to end it. Of course, our strategy is to resolve things through negotiations, but we are concerned whether the other side believes in negotiations or not, he said, according to Iran's MEHR news agency. We do not seek war, but our strategy is that if they start a war, its end will be ours. RF's comments Israeli officials have made clear that they do seek another war with Iran. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu released a video last week where he spoke in English and urged the Iranian people to rise up against the government. And Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has repeatedly threatened Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. Since the end of the 12-day U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, there have been no negotiations between Washington and Tehran. Iran is seeking assurances that it won't be attacked again during the next round of talks, and it also maintains that the U.S. must not demand zero uranium enrichment. For his part, President Trump has threatened to bomb Iran again if it restarts uranium enrichment. So, much like with Ukraine, we're sort of at an impasse with the Iranians. They aren't going to give up enrichment, and they also need guarantees from the U.S. that they won't get bombed. And Trump openly says that, well, if they do enrichment, we're going to bomb them again, which kills two birds in one stone, making it clear that negotiations are not going to happen until somebody gives. And unfortunately for the Iranians, if the Russians and the Chinese don't signal they're going to support them in their effort to continue enrichment, they may be forced to blink. They may be forced to be the ones to give up and to have to come to the negotiating table and to break bread and have to give up their demands, which is domestic enrichment. They might have to allow Russian enrichment or something. But again, the U.S. isn't going to want to give Russia some big diplomatic victory where they've somehow helped secure nuclear world peace. So again, I don't see this going anywhere besides another war. I do believe the 12-day war is going to be the appetizer to the main course in the Middle East. And there's a chance that if these negotiations here in this Trump-Putin-Zelensky summit doesn't lead to something akin to a ceasefire here in the next few months, then we may be seeing, the real Russia-Ukraine war, the real Russia-Ukraine-NATO war in Europe that all of the past 3+ years have really been a prelude to. So we have to pray for positive outcomes in that regard, which again, the prophecies talk about contingent plans, where if in certain states of repentance, the destruction could be a lot less bad. And I think we really do want, if we understand World War III is going to happen, which unfortunately it is and already is, it would be better for it to escalate from the Levant in the Middle East as opposed to Europe and the North with NATO. I've talked to Metropolitan Neophytos about this and others, and that is sort of the worst case scenario, is if things escalate between Russia and NATO in Europe itself. So we got to make sure that doesn't happen. Not that I'm hoping for an Iran-Israel war or anything like that, but understanding that these things are effectively inevitable, those are sort of the signs and the things we can notice to interpret how these things are going and the actual purposes of these prophecies, which is repentance. And again, I'm just a guy. This is stuff I've just heard from the saints and from those that knew them. So if you're not into it, take it with a grain of salt, because I'm just here yapping into a webcam in my bedroom. But again, any super chats anyone wants to send, feel free. Going to play some Ethnoguesser here in a second. Obviously, yeah, we'll share this tab. This doesn't have the live stream. I'm not going to refresh the tab, but here you can see our latest episode of World War Now, episode 131. You can get Dimitri and I's full reaction to the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska, situation in Ukraine, and then you can, of course, see our episode here with Steve Su, the truth about Taiwan, China's plans for the region, World War III in the South Pacific, and more. This is probably my favorite, one of my favorite analysis guests that we've had on for Ether Hour. It's sort of like a World War Now episode, but broadly about the China situation. But it is, Ether Hour, so partially behind the paywall. But Steve Su has been one of my favorite China analysts for a very, very long time. I heard him on Geopolitics and Empire in 2022, I think, before I even started World War Now. So I've been listening to him for a while, and it was a privilege to have him on the show. I'd been hoping to have him on Ether Hour since we started Ether Hour. So really give it a listen. I would really appreciate it. This episode could get to 50 likes, the Taiwan episode. So go to the Substack, like that episode, restack it, send it to your family and friends. I would greatly appreciate it. If you're not doing that, you're not really on the team here. So what can I say? But thank you to everybody that has liked it and has restacked it. It really means a lot. We've got $5 here from Paisios. What are your thoughts on the apostate prophet saying that the Bishop of Gaza is a terrorist and an Islamic supporter and not a Christian? Well, we've all, I think, had our fair share of dunking on Ridvan, the apostate prophet himself, who has, made it his mission to vindicate, I guess, Zionism within Orthodoxy, make it clear that you can accept that, which is obviously not true. You can't believe in this dual covenant theology, this idea that somehow the Jewish people are still in any way chosen by God. outside, frankly, at this point, the only way they fit into God's plan is largely nefarious. But this idea that the Jewish nation is anything to do with what's written in the scriptures, with the Israel that's mentioned in the scriptures, is all obviously absurd. But I guess if we want to do a little bit of drama posting, we can investigate here. I can go down to my posts about Ridvan. Well, here, just to see the Twitter timeline, we've got post here. We will take back Constantinople, but not by our own doing. The way most of our youth have turned out, we are not capable of such a thing. However, God will arrange for others to take the city and hand it over to us as a solution to their own problems. St. Paisios of Mount Athos and I put this image together with a map of Russian Constantinople, a map of what Greece could look like in the immediate aftermath of the war, some relevant flags. But let's go to I don't know how long ago it was when I was going back and forth with apostate prophet. We'll come back to this in a second. Yeah, this is important about Mount Tabor. But I was definitely, dunking on e-girls. Sorry, you'll have to see the stupid posts, but it had to happen. I had a thread about the Mandylion, about the Holy Napkin, if anybody had wanted to read that. Where am I back and forth with Ridvan here? Probably talk about this. Archbishop Alexei had to respond to a bunch of outrage from people over him meeting Putin and venerating icons, which is, of course, ridiculous. Where is my I'll probably read maybe my Indian thread as well, which I think I should have potentially read. No, I guess that wouldn't have been posted last week. Man, I didn't realize I post so much. I guess that's that, but yeah, here we go. We have Ridvan slandering Orthodox nuns. Here we go. So Ridvan, I say, I guess you aren't interested in becoming Orthodox anymore after he responded to the interview with Mother Agapia on Tucker Carlson, calling her a demon. He then quote tweets me, "This guy is a Hitler-loving neo-Nazi, but apparently the Orthodox Church is totally fine with that. This is the Orthodox Church today. I don't want it at all." I'm not sure. I'm not sure where he's even getting the idea that I'm a Hitler-loving neo-Nazi. Obviously, someone presses me, I might have an unorthodox opinion on World War II or something like that. But if you go through my profile, there's nothing really about Hitler or the Nazis or anything like that. Of course, he's getting kind of cooked in the replies, even though he's got tens of thousands of retarded followers. I then quote tweeted, "After your behavior this past few days, you could call me anything. It would be an honor for any Orthodox Christian to be reviled by an evil vessel such as yourself." He then tries to demand I affirm the Philo-Semitic creed, the anti-Nicene creed. Maybe you can help me out if you're so truthful. 1, was Hitler rather good or rather bad? 2, were the National Socialists better or worse than the Allies? 3, did the Nazis murder 6 million Jews? 4, do you agree with their views on Jews? 5, if you could pick one, who would it be? Archbishop Elpidophoros or Hitler? That's it, guys. The final dialectic, Elpidophoros or Hitler? Who you picking? Who you picking? I'm going to leave it up to the audience, personally. I then reply, "You are a deranged person, sputtering about Hitler and a war from over 80 years ago, while a genocide is ongoing, which you support. Stop demanding people pledge allegiance to your idolatrous secular religion." He says, "Coward." I say, "Idolater." And then some idiot calls me a demi, which is funny because this person also quote tweets and likes almost all of my posts. So the super hardcore, actually, this reminds me, people, obviously everyone hates Nick all the time, but it shows you exactly the situation we're talking about here. We got Charlie Kirk, well-known Shabbos Goy, race traitor type individual. He goes, "Muslims do not assimilate. They aggregate, infiltrate, and conquer. That's the plan." Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. Maybe it is. And he says, "If I tweeted this in the UK, would I be arrested?" Nick Twentis, if I tweeted this in the USA, would I be arrested? Jews do not assimilate, they aggregate, infiltrate, and conquer. That's the plan. And if you read, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, a lot of these laws that have attempted to be passed in certain states, if the Zionists had their way, if AIPAC had their way, if the ADL had their way, this would be illegal in the United States. This would not be allowed. And I probably shouldn't be showing that on the screen, streaming here on YouTube for too long, because I'm totally going to get demonetized. But we have $5 from Zach Flatten, good buddy. Lately, Ridvan has been battling with the archons of the patriarch. Pretty excited to see how this turns out. Yeah, that's a two retards fighting situation, if I've ever seen one. And I'm not saying that certain archons maybe are more respectable than others, but even the fact that Elias Damianakis, that guy, you have to look this guy up. Yes, Archon Elias Damianakis. This guy is one of the biggest clowns I've ever encountered in my time in the Orthodox Church. I've obviously blocked him because he is directly affiliated with the CIA and would do everything in his power to ruin somebody's life. He doesn't believe in the sainthood of the Romanov royal martyrs or of a number of other Russian saints. He is an imbecile, and he is, in my opinion, an agent of forces in high places far before he is an iconographer or some kind of servant of the church in this archon role. He has been selected with that role because he is a well-connected person who is dedicated, I think, at an intelligence level to the cause of ecumenism and the ecumenical patriarchate as a Atlanticist power outlet. So that is, forgetting even why I was talking about that. But yeah, that's the situation with the archons. But Broken Clock is right twice a day. If they're liberals, at the very least, you have to be against Israel and pro-Palestine if you're one of these liberals. And they're apparently even Father Alex Karloutzos, who I am not a fan of, was in some way involved with hooking up Tucker with Mother Agapia and getting that interview going, which I think is very good. It's evidence that the ecumenical patriarch can still be on the right side of things. Yet Ridvan is the problem is you've got a few Russians, a few Serbs, people that have fought Muslims in their time, maybe even a few people in the Antiochian Archdiocese that are gonna, just enough of them to give Ridvan the possibility to say, there are Orthodox that support me. There's Orthodox that aren't these anti-Semitic dhimmis that want to, side with Muslims against Israel, which again is a total caricature of our position. If anything, I'm probably more anti-immigrant than Ridvan, so I don't know how his argument is that I'm somehow pro-Muslim, but I think, unfortunately, the Zionist entity, it's becoming clear that Zion is going to be, what enslaves us, not the Islamic crescent in this capacity. The Islamic crescent is used, it is largely a tool of the six-pointed star that we know has been lurking behind the scenes here. But any other super chats, we are appreciating it. Big thanks to Zach, Paisios, Alan, Jonathan, Pantalemon. Y'all are the ones keeping the lights on here at the proverbial World War Now bunker. We've got some good shows coming up this week with Gennady, Dmitry, our economics friend, who will be discussing the economics of the ongoing Third World War with us on Ether Hour. So all of that in your prayers. Keep my upcoming travels in your prayers. I'll probably have more details on that in the next few weeks. But I think before we do any Ethnoguesser, let's talk about this. I've already read this, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. But I want to kind of use this talk about, cancel culture, how people should respond to these sorts of things. And I think, I'll give Archbishop Alexei, not that my opinion matters at all, and no one should be walking around grading bishops on all of their things. But when it comes to sort of responding to cancel culture, I have an opinion on it, of course. I would say I would give Archbishop Alexei a B+, maybe an A-, maybe like an 89 or a 90 on his response here. This is the article. It says, His Eminence Archbishop Alexei of the Orthodox Church in America's Diocese of Sitka in Alaska briefly met with President Putin during the latter's visit to Alaska to discuss the war in Ukraine with President Trump on Friday. President Putin conveyed his greetings to His Holiness Patriarch, the greetings of His Holiness Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Russia, and greeted the Archbishop with icons of St. Herman of Alaska and the Dormition of the Mother of God. In turn, Archbishop Alexei, whose diocese was formed by great Russian missionaries such as St. Herman and St. Innocent, who was personally converted to Orthodoxy through the Russian tradition, and who was personally converted to Orthodox through the Russian tradition, including the works of Dostoevsky, greeted President Trump warmly and expressed his gratitude to previous Russian leaders who sent missionaries to Alaska. He also spoke of how he and his clergy feel at home when they go on pilgrimage to Russia. Leading up to the summit, Archbishop Alexei led his entire diocese in a week of prayers for peace. As he told Russian media, prayer clears rage from the air so reason can speak. However, unsurprisingly, the brief encounter between Archbishop Alexei and President Putin drew strong and varied reactions online. Many praised the Archbishop for giving a humble example of the peace and love his diocese had spent a week praying for, while others leveled accusations that he had betrayed the gospel by treating the Russian head of state with respect rather than condemnation. Some even made the truly preposterous argument that the meeting proves that the OCA, which has been autocephalous for more than 50 years, is very much captive to the Moscow Patriarchate, to its Russian history, and by extension, the Putin regime. Seemingly unaware that the OCA Synod, which includes Archbishop Alexei, has in fact condemned the war in Ukraine in no uncertain terms. Notably, the hierarchs of the Patriarch of Constantinople's Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA, Metropolitan Anthony, and Archbishop Daniel issued a statement entitled The Betrayal of Christian Witness, in welcoming a tyrant and dictator. The statement begins, "It is with deep sorrow and righteous indignation that we respond to the recent words of a hierarch of the Orthodox Church in North America, who publicly welcomed and complimented the President of the Russian Federation during his visit to the United States of America." However, Archbishop Alexei, in fact, did not compliment President Putin, but rather expressed gratitude for the leaders of the past who sent missionaries and said he feels at home when on pilgrimage in Russia. He did not praise the President personally, nor the war in Ukraine. This goes on. Obviously, the USA is, they're not schismatics, but they're the closest thing to the schismatics we have in the US. They are Ukrainians under the EP. They're still canonical. They're still ostensibly in some capacity connected to the UOC under Metropolitan Onufri, but they are, I would at this point wager, largely are supporters of the schismatic OCU, which is not good. Archbishop Alexei issued a statement. He said, "Recently, much has been said and written about my brief greeting with Putin during his visit to Alaska. Many have misunderstood that moment, and some have taken offense. I write to you, my brothers, so that you may understand my heart and give clear witness to our faithful. Before any photograph or video, we had already dedicated our diocese to prayer. For 3 days, our churches were filled with people, Unangan, Yupik, Sukpiak, Tingit, and many others, praying for peace of the suffering in Ukraine and for the conversion of hearts. Bells rang, candles were lit, and our villages lifted up tears and petitions before the Lord. This was and remains the true work of the church, our gift to the world." While I expressed gratitude in that public moment, it was not praise for present politics, but a remembrance of the missionaries of earlier generations, St. Herman, St. Innocent, St. Yakov, and others who brought us the Orthodox faith at a great cost. Their sacrifices are inheritance. For that spiritual gift, we must always give thanks. As for the icons exchanged, some have condemned me for that, but I must be clear. The veneration we give to holy icons is directed not to the one who gives them, but to the saint or feast they represent. I cannot apologize for kissing an icon of St. Herman or of the Dormition of the Mother of God. Even if the greatest sinner were beside me, the honor passes not to him, but to heaven itself. I know that sacred gestures can be misunderstood, and I grieve if this has caused confusion or scandal, but our vocation in such moments is not to join the anger of the world, but to keep the lamp of Christ burning, to obey his commandments, to pray for even for our enemies, and to open whatever small door may be given for a pastoral word of peace. Fathers, I ask you to continue leading our people in prayer. Remind them that we do not sanctify violence nor ignore suffering. We condemn the shedding of innocent blood wherever it occurs. At the same time, we show love even toward those who oppose us, for the gospel calls us to nothing less. If asked, you may tell your faithful simply this: the Archbishop called our diocese to prayer, and in that spirit spoke of gratitude for the saints who brought us to the faith. Nothing more, nothing less. The prayers are what remain before God. The pictures will pass away. May the crucified and risen Lord comfort you, strengthen you, and keep your flocks in peace. With God's blessing, Archbishop Alexei. So, decent response. I think in many ways, my only criticism would be, again, I think you could have taken a strong stance and just not responded, which I think is always the best. If you didn't do anything wrong, there's no need to release a statement, because if you have nothing to apologize for, then, well, you have nothing to apologize for. But more than that, I think, as much as I think this is a good statement, he didn't, disavow or really come out on any one side of it. The OCA does officially, while they disagree with the war, things have changed at this point. The escalations against the canonical church there have escalated, and Metropolitan Tikhon has traveled and concelebrated with Metropolitan Onufri. They are recognizing the persecution of the UOC. And now, Lavrov, Putin have made it clear that ending the persecution and restoring the UOC to its status as the canonical Orthodox Church in Ukraine is a condition that the Russians are putting forward for the peace process. So, if I was an OCA bishop, I think that it is clear that Putin is obviously a lot more legitimate of a ruler and should be a lot more respected by American Orthodox Christians than Zelensky, who is facilitating the persecution of the bishops and the priests that we are in communion with. $10 from Paisios. Will there be an episode on the toll houses? I'm assuming that's what you mean, not the tall houses. And have you heard about this from monks at the Ephraim monasteries in the Holy Mountain that maybe some of us lay people would not know about? Not really my place to talk about. I'm not necessarily an expert on the toll houses, but read, several hundred pages. Literally got to blow the dust off of this thing. Several hundred pages of the departure of the soul, which is pretty much the thickest book I have on my shelf. This is, the definitive text on the question of the toll houses, the particular judgment, the soul after death in the Orthodox tradition. And of course, it starts with scripture, the liturgical services, the lives of the saints, the writings of the saints. It's got hundreds of iconographic, demonstrations in the middle of the book. So it's not really worth consulting my opinion on this. Maybe we'll have an episode on it, talk to Father Peter, talk to Father John, maybe we'll even have a bishop on to talk about something like that. But I think if you really want to know about this, I would cough up. I mean, at one point this was like $50. So this is more than worth the $50. If you don't have $50, DoorDash for 2 days and you'll have enough money to buy The Departure of the Soul, which I think this can engross anyone for a few weeks or months if you really want to know about the toll houses. I mean, this was recommended by, it's pretty funny. I bought this at the time. Metropolitan Joseph was, of course, in charge of the Antiochian Archdiocese in America, and he, of course, is no longer a bishop. But yeah, we have, I mean, just so people realize I'm not just speaking out of my butt here. This is recommended by Metropolitan Joseph of the Antiochian Archdiocese, Metropolitan Clarion, First Hierarch of Rokor, Bishop Mitrophon of the Serbian Diocese, Nikolai of the Romanian Diocese of America, Bishop Irene of the OCA, Metropolitan Jonah of the OCA, all sorts of people. It comes recommended by John McGuckin, all sorts of well-respected scholars. So I would say check this out if you want to know about the toll houses. Thank you for the $10, Paisios. Jonathan Kelly, $4.99. Gambling odds on Melania Trump being descendant of the Romanovs. Fairly low, I would assume. We might have already heard about that, but she sort of has the look. Unfortunately, she is an abortionist, former not good lady, but pray for her. I hope she's doing well. I hope her Christian faith is legitimate. And if that's true, it would still be good because then we can get Barron. If that was true, we could try to get Barron baptized Orthodox and get him teaming up with Gabriel Doroshin, and we can have a dual Romanov czar, emperor, and military dictator, military adjudicant with Gabriel Doroshin. So that's my LARP fantasy for the day. But 53 or so minutes here. Solid super chat, solid questions, everybody. But I think it's time. It's time to do some Ethnoguesser. I'm going to switch my tabs around here. All right. Let's hop into the daily game. Oh boy. So, I mean, these could be somewhere in the South Pacific, but I'm sort of tempted with it's like a South African subvariety or these Madagascarans, or what are we dealing with here? What are we dealing with here? I've said before, I do better when I'm like speed running, but then I wouldn't be able to farm engagement and farm super chats from the chat if I just and clicked it through. So people are saying link the book, homie. Just go to pretty sure it's just on the St. Anthony's website. Like, I'm pretty sure it's that simple. Yeah, it's $59 from St. Anthony's Monastery, which I just dropped in the chat. Let's see the Substack chat, which I'm checking on my phone. I know we had Anthony of Westgate tuning in on Substack, so big shout out to Anthony. Hopefully we can do a show with him fairly soon, but we have this episode with Gennady, then we have to do the Q&A thread. I guess that's one thing I can plug as well, is if you haven't already, we do have a lot of questions already, so if you haven't asked us a question, if you are behind the paywall, or if you just want to get behind the paywall and ask us a question, be sure to go to the chat on the World War Now Substack, worldwarnow.co, and you can find our Q&A thread, and you can ask us whatever question you want to have it answered in a future Ether Hour episode. So you can check that out. Got another Jonathan Kelly, $4.99. Gambling odds of one perfect score on Ethnoguesser. I don't think it's that hard to get a perfect score. A lot of them are fairly wide click ranges, so I wouldn't be surprised if I get one on stream eventually. But it's not. I don't know. I don't know the over under on that. Maybe someone will. Maybe someone can do that for me, and we can get. I don't know. I'm against gambling, so we got to be careful, even if it is fun. Tall House. I'm assuming you've also never heard of the Toll Houses. You should check out the book that I just recommended. That and The Soul After Death by Father Seraphim Rose. I mean, for those that don't know, just Conrad lore. When I was reading that book, The Soul After Death by Father Seraphim, I was on the subway. I was at a subway station in New York, and in that moment, I was like, "This is true. Like, this is true. The Toll Houses are true. Orthodoxy is true. The metaphysical reality is completely real, and it is as described by the Orthodox saints." So that book was very special to me because I sort of attribute that to that breakthrough moment with Orthodoxy and with my current sort of metaphysical understanding and philosophical Weltanschauung. So thank you to Father Seraphim, and thank you to the Toll Houses. People say it's controversial to talk about them. Some people deny them entirely, but the Toll Houses are present in our funerary liturgies and our services, so they are an undeniable reality of our tradition. I would recommend reading about them in the book, again, from St. Anthony's and from Father Seraphim. So that's my recommendation there. But again, I got nobody helping me on this, on these characters. Paisio says, yeah, I didn't talk to anyone about the Toll Houses on Mount Athos. So, maybe I'll talk to some monks, maybe next time I'm talking to some monastic friends of mine, I'll ask if there's anything they think about it that's relevant. But I think that book says most of what needs to be said, but I promise if I hear something, and even if it isn't stream appropriate, Paisios, you'll be the first to know. Do not worry. But I'm going to need to, can someone please tell me, someone give me a guess on who these people are? Because I'm very tempted to put South Africa, but I have a strong feeling that it's going to be some of the characters over here, and I'm going to feel like a total imbecile. Oh, man. If it's South Africa, I'm going to be unhappy. It was South Africa. They're from the Kalahari. Yeah, you think it does say. Great that you sent that 40 seconds after I guessed. All right. We can only go up from here. These are like those Yemen people. Has to be. They were Indian. They did look Indian. Oh, my Lord. These gotta be from like. There's no way these are like Maldivians or anything like that. I literally said not Malawi. I mean, not Malawi. I said not Maldives. The Andaman Islands. Yeah, that's just the freaking Maldives. I'm getting brutalized. Now this is confusing too. The guy on the left looks almost like an Amerindian. I have no idea. This is like the hardest round yet. I almost just want to start over. We're just going to start over, gang. Unless the daily game is... it's the same people. All right. I should just play a challenge round. But now I can feel good about getting a good score. My bad. I forgot it's the daily. You're all watching me cheat. My elo was going to get too low. So we okay, we're back. Now we're back to the now I can lose again. Oh my goodness. See, I just cheated and I'm still just going to do it absolutely terrible because I have no idea who these people are. The person on the right looks like they could be, Powhatan, wah, wah, wah. This person on the left looks like, I don't know, like a rapist. Look like they look ready to rape is what they look like. I gotta think it's gotta be like Pakistan or maybe something in South America. Thank you again for the $10, Nicholas LK. I want to thank you for that. The guy on the left does not look South American, but that might be what is going on here. Actually, no, I think I might. Oh. Okay. Toda. Ended subtypes. All right. Good thing I didn't go South America. Oh boy. See, these look like Africans, but they could totally be like islanders. Oh, these could be Fijians. That's a good call. Where is Fiji? Am I retarded? Vanuatu, New Caledonia. There we go. Ooh, dang. Good guess, but they were Papuans, effectively. Brachiomelanesids. An atypical brachycephalic melanacid variety native to Melanesia and New Guinea. In its pronounced form in the Karewo of Garibati Island in the Papua Gulf and related to the Kiwi. I should have gone Solomon Islands, like I almost did. If I just thought the Solomon Islands were Fiji, I could have gotten them, but that was pretty good. Oh, the classic this region. I knew it was going to be more of a Caucasoid, but I was afraid for the potential Romanians, so I hedged. That's my hedge when it comes to people that look like that, when it comes to the Turco-Eurasian, Slavic, Caucasoid characters. But The Metebids, alpinized Dinaro Armeni adapted to life in mountainous regions. So they're mountainous characters like this. Alrighty. That was easy. These are East Africans. These are like Ethiopians. What are we talking? Those are Moors that look just like Ethiopians. Dang it. Gonna have to internalize that one. Totally thought I had that one in the bag. Oh boy. I feel like I'm getting South Africa on this too, but that might be wrong. 10 out of 10. We really need a 5K. Someone said they looked like me. Nobody in this map looked like me. I have light eyes and blondish brown hair. I don't think these are Somalis though, but yeah, Chadians, lake folk. Top 8%. Definitely has nothing to do with the fact that I cheated for the first 5 rounds by accident. But yeah, they were, I was a Saharan Ethiopian, which I guess I kind of was in the similar. I was sort of thinking that, but I just went too far south. Yeah, those were literal Chads, but there we are. That's the game. That's the day. Let's check Twitter. Let's check Telegram. Let's see if there's any news. I got to bring you folks here that I would be remiss not to. We got breaking news. Elon Musk is abandoning his attempt to create a new political party and instead is preparing to fully back J.D. Vance for president in 2028. Well, that solidifies the thesis that J.D. Vance is going to be the full sort of infiltrated Zog right-wing candidate. So that's the situation there. I'm not seeing anything else breaking news here, but yeah, if anyone has any final super chats, please send them in. We want to thank Nicholas LK, Jonathan Kelly, Paisios, Zach Flatten, Pantalemon, and Alan Wong for your very generous donations. They are very, very much appreciated. Again, be sure to follow me on X at GnomeRad. Subscribe here on YouTube if this is your first time tuning in and you haven't done so already. Obviously, again, here I'm at 11.1K. Very grateful for all the follows. Hoping to grow more. Keep boosting me up there. You can tune into the stream on X as well, obviously. That's an option. So there you can tune into the stream on X as well. So let's shut that up. But obviously X is where a lot of hot takes are coming in. You know, you're seeing posting about prophecies. Oh, yes, we had to talk about this. I knew we were forgetting something. Israeli police ban celebration of Transfiguration on Mount Tabor. And of course, this cloud, many are familiar with it. This miracle happens every year on the old calendar feast of the Transfiguration. And it says here, police said that the ban was due to the organizers' failure to meet several conditions necessary for holding the feast and ensuring the safety of participants. Paisio says all of us have to be never Vancers forever. And I agree. As much as I do think J.D. Vance has helped in some capacity on the Ukrainian Orthodox Church scenario, I see him as the Trojan horse that gets us into the full war with Iran if somehow we are able to evade that in the next few years of the Trump presidency, which I'm also skeptical of. But this goes, Galilee, the Israeli police have prohibited the celebration of the Feast of the Transfiguration of the Lord on Mount Tabor, citing the organizers' inability to provide sufficient safety guarantees. According to the press service of the Israeli police, commander of the Northern District, Shimon ben Shabo, issued... Oh my gosh, these fucking people, man. Shimon ben Shabo? We have to take orders from Shimon ben Shabo. We're Christians, man. We're Romans. We are the children of the resurrection. We feast on the deified flesh of God. We have the emperors as our saints on our side. We have, you know, thousands of warriors that have passed before us, and we are sitting here and we have to listen to Shimon ben Shabo in his stupid little hat and his retarded religion tell us that we can't celebrate the transfiguration of our Lord at the summit of the mountain where it occurred, man. It just makes you sick. What does this guy look like? What the hell does Shimon ben Shavo look like? I'm not finding a super good picture. Not worth it right now, but sick world we live in, man. Police stated that the reason for the decision was the organizers failed to fulfill several requirements for conducting the event and guaranteeing participants' safety. An additional factor was the resignation of the representative of the Israeli Ministry of Internal Affairs, who had previously overseen the feast in past years. The decision to ban the celebration was also reported by the Jewish National Fund, the Fire Service, Emergency Medical Services, and the Parks and Nature Authority. Previously, UOJ reported that the municipality of Jerusalem has frozen bank accounts belonging to the Patriarchate of Jerusalem in response to a years-long tax dispute. So they've debanked the Patriarchate. They prevented them from celebrating the Transfiguration. At what point, again, if the Russians were truly, Third Rome and were actually trying to be serious about restoring their status as a Christian power, they'd be going in and forcing Israel to stop all of this. But unfortunately, we don't see that. Pantaleimon. JD Vance will give us the first H1B First Lady. That's true. We will have, Krishna and Ganesh worship in the White House if we have President JD Vance and First Lady Usha. So something to keep in mind. I should probably read my relevant thread, but yeah, we can't be sorry for getting spurging out about Shlomo there, but that's just not what we need. Gotta read my my gem post recently. All right, speaking of the H1B First Lady and the invasion of our society by subcontinentals, the gifted Father Anastasio of Kudumas also stressed that similar ideas of hedonism and pansexualism invaded the West through Hinduism. It is reported that the ancient Greek king Alexander sealed the gates of the Indies. The same is also reported by St. Andrew the Fool for Christ. But what do they mean? Some misrepresented this, thinking that he sealed the gates in the earth through which subterranean creatures came to the surface. It is not so. This is Father Anastasios. He reposed in 2013. He's considered a saintly elder by many in Greece. I have the picture of Alexander confronting many of the Eastern militaries here. I chose the images. The thread is obviously not my original content. He says, there are no extraterrestrials or subterraneans. Listen to the explanation that civilized and sophisticated king Listen to the explanation that civilized and sophisticated king Alexander beheld a terrible sight around the Himalayas. He saw not just most primitive, but nearly beastly peoples, eating snakes, flies, spiders, all kinds of filth. Moreover, they committed all kinds of perversion among them and had criminal instincts. I won't show the bestiality and weird Kama Sutra sculptures, but I will show, these weird demonic entities that they worship. That, again, do we want someone that worships these things in the White House? I don't think so. And we have, the nonsense, the gross snakes and things that they eat. Then he, meaning Alexander, knelt, and in tears he lifted his hands to the sky and prayed, saying, true and only God. He did not believe in the dodecatheon. So this assertion by Elder Anastasios is that Alexander the Great was a proto-Christian, that he did not actually believe in the pantheon of gods, but he was sort of a Socratic Aristotelian figure and believing in the one unknown God in a monotheistic way, which, again, considering he was a student of Aristotle, it's not necessarily too far-fetched. Please send invincible elements of nature and isolate these abominable nations so that they will never mix with other peoples and infect their blood. So obviously Alexander. Instantly, huge glaciers were formed and constrained those obscene nations in the areas of Tibet and the Himalayas. Centuries went by, and never did peoples travel from those eastern places to our own areas. They were prevented by those natural boundaries and the flaming prayer of Alexander the Great. And I put a Rarick painting of the Himalayas. And then this was, their weird demonic ethereal energy harvesting devices they have high in the mountains there, consorting with demons. For those that don't know, the tallest unclimbed peak in the world, I'm forgetting the name. It's called like Gutar Klabuba Buba, something like that. It's on the border with China and Bhutan. and it's forbidden from being climbed because it is considered in Bhutan, all mountains are holy. They've banned all mountaineering. They consider it the realm of their demonic gods that they worship. So they're pretty much protecting it, in my opinion, from the sanctification of God. At a certain level, Christian commandos are going to have to be airdropped to the top of these mountains, and they're going to have to erect crosses, icons, hold some services, bring some relics, and consecrate a temple to finally secure the final upper peaks where the aerial demons have nestled down and are still enjoying the worship of these, these Himalayan, Tibetan mountain demon worshippers that Father Anastasios is warning us about here. So it goes on. Lately, their dirty morals invaded our civilization. The embodiment of pansexualism, the Kama Sutra, comes from them. The Indians and the Agarines have the rod of perversion. They eat filthy things. They're bloodthirsty. They worship Satan. They cultivate all kinds of perversion and sorcery. And of course, we have the Canadian reminders for Indians, immigrants to not poop on the beach. We have the fourth tallest statue in the United States or something like that, with this monkey god Hanuman, which is in Texas, that was recently erected. And we, of course, have this river in Canada being converted into the Ganges as they do some poo-poo pee-pee rituals in the river there. And then we have Tibet is the universal layer of Satanism. In the future, you will witness terrible earthquakes, epidemics, and calamities ravaging the area. There will be a very strong earthquake like in Japan. And I just did a final example of the freaky stuff that these people are into. This quote is a footnote from the book Love in Christ, or Metapatristic Agapology by Elder Savas, the Hagiorite, who's from Mount Athos, and it's about St. Porphyrios and many of his teachings. So I find this to be very humorous, yet also deeply, I think, profoundly true in a sort of metaphysical sense, story, universal history from the Blessed Elder here. So, and then of course we had a lot of people had their opinions on it. Of course, Ethan Wayne, our good friend. Let's see. POV just posted an absolute gem. Wow. Just wow. I have no words. Ethan was so impressed by the analysis from Father Anastasios, he was stunned into silence. So thank you, Ethan. Very cool. But with all of that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I've not seen any other super chats, so if there's any last minute questions, feel free to send them in. I want to encourage everybody. worldwarnow.co. Once again, please get behind the paywall. It really helps us out. I've noticed Paisios in particular and others have been going back. They've been clicking the Ether Hour tab on the Substack, on the website on there. I believe I'm not sure if you can find the tab on the app, but you can go to the Substack section in the podcast section and scroll all the way down, even on the app, and you can watch hundreds of our old episodes. We have episodes about Russian folklore, about a potentially flat Earth and the land of Kitej up in the Arctic Circle. We have interviews with Abbot Trifon about his elder, Blessed Dimitri of Santa Rosa, a very lesser-known American saint. We have our interview with Steve Su that I just mentioned about China, Taiwan. We have interviews with Vince James. We have interviews with Father Peter Hears about all sorts of fantastic issues, Elder Ephraim in particular. So please get behind that paywall. Check out all of our content. Again, follow me on X, follow World War Now account on X at World War Now _. Subscribe to us here on YouTube. Again, follow us on Telegram at World War Now Telly. Find us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, everywhere podcasts are found pretty much. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm not seeing any super chats here. If you send one in at the last minute and I already turn us off, I apologize, but thank everybody for tuning in. This has been quite the fun stream, and I'll be back again next week. So again, worldwarnow.co. Oh, I gotta get the share stream going here. And with all of that, we will see you on the next one. God bless.